I'd like to take you through another game by Sam Shankland from the American Continental tournament played in Montevideo. Tournament that he won. This game was from round 6. There are 11 rounds. And it's played against the player who turned out to be his chief rival in the tournament, Flores from Argentina. And this is an extraordinary game. So tactical. So many interesting attacking ideas. So it's a real roller coaster ride. So just hang on to your seats and follow the action. So it's a Nimzo Indian, Shankland with black, and he's playing one of the main lines. Many ways to play this with black, but this is a really reliable method. So you attack white centre and you give white an isolated queen's pawn. It's a matter of taste whether you like playing with these or not. Personally, I like playing both sides of this kind of position. It's very standard. It's very sound classical chess. Now you can play knight d7 or knight c6. It's one of the main moves. And here my database shows that Alekhine in 1933 played queen d3, of course a very natural move to connect the rooks. But Flores played a3, putting the question to the bishop straight away. You can just take on c3, but Shankland came back to e7, just breaking that pin here. And the bishop dropped to a2, preempting an attack on the c file, and rook c8. Of course, that's where the rook belongs. Rook e1 from white. I mean, there are so many ways to play this. Queen d3 is an option on many of these moves. Now h6 puts the question to the bishop. If the bishop heads to, well, if he goes backwards, then that certainly takes pressure off black. If you take, then, well, d5 is often a move that could give white some play. It kind of liberates white's pieces and you get through to f7. But in this position, rook c7 is an excellent move. Very typical for these kind of positions. Defending f7, preparing to put the rook on d7, and actually black is very well coordinated in that position. So after h6, bishop h4 played, and now knight h5. Absolutely typical way of freeing black's position. There's a famous game between Korchnoi and Karpov in their World Championship match where Karpov employed exactly this maneuver in a similar IQP position. The idea is that if bishop takes, you recapture with the knight, and that opens up the bishop and increases black's control over d5, and black is fine there. So the bishop dropped to g3, but it's nice for black that this bishop is in the sights of the knight. I mean, in fact, it was exchanged off straight away. And there are pros and cons to this exchange. Obviously, black grabs one of those bishops. That's nice, but this structure is often quite pleasant for white, actually. That pawn on g3 controls these squares, gives the king an escape square. It's pretty solid. And now Shankland provoked an advance with bishop f6. Of course, you want your bishop on the long diagonal. And here he chanced it a little bit. He took on d5. He could have kind of dampened things down a little bit with bishop c3. And I don't think this is so bad for black. I mean, maybe white is marginally better in this position. But again, this maneuver with rook c7 should free black's game. I mean, a couple of possibilities. The rook might come here. Sometimes the queen shifts over to c8. Black is fine. But instead, pawn takes. I suppose this is a more principled move because you want to keep your dark-squared bishop. Knight takes, but now it gets really, really complicated. Black's problem here is that that knight dominates the queen. If we could shift the queen to a better square and connect the rooks, if we could magically put a rook on d8, everything would be fine. But that queen hasn't got a good square. It's really problematic, and also has to keep an eye on that bishop. So Shankland plays the most uncompromising move, bishop takes pawn. And the rook came up and bishop takes pawn again. So he's now 2 pawns up. But that bishop has moved away from the king side. And there's also a problem with the queen still. Rook d2, excellent move. So this is a big theme. And now it might have been more prudent to play the king to h8, possibly rook e8 as well. Instead, Shankland played the bishop to c5, which on the surface of it looks like a very natural move. The bishop was kind of dangling on a3, it's loose. So Shankland puts it back on c5, where it's solidly protected by that pawn on b6. Looks right. But white succeeds in generating an extraordinary attack now. Knight c3. Hits the queen. And that's a bit awkward. Doesn't have an easy square to go to. If the queen goes to f6, it gets hit by the knight coming to e4. And it's not simple. So queen c7 played, and now rook d7. And this, of course, is extremely dangerous for black. Rook looks through the queen to the bishop, also looks at this incredibly sensitive point on f7. Well, black would like to be able to take on g3, exploiting that pin, but knight e4 actually wins material. The queen is attacked. The knight defends the pawn. The bishop is attacked. And, well, just watch this. The queen retreats, and that holds the bishop. And now there's a wonderful way for white to win, which we're going to see throughout this game now. White would win with queen d3. And the threat is to play knight f6, followed by queen g6. And if bishop e7 stops knight f6, bishop b1, it's a real slow motion attack, but black doesn't have any pieces defending his king. So this is actually winning. So obviously the threat is to move the knight and give checkmate here. So if g6, you can take. And this is actually winning anyway. If king h8, then queen d4. You can attack the queen, but the queen just drops back. Now it's safe. And there's going to be a devastating check somewhere here. One of these, followed by mate or taking the queen. So this is a really common idea. So the queen had to go back to b8, and now white can win just by shifting his pieces to the king side. So the winning move here is knight e4, and it's a very similar idea to that we've just seen. So let me show you, well, the main idea. Let's say rook d8 for black, which looks very logical to exchange off this powerful rook on the 7th rank. But now, a slow motion move. We can't play knight f6 immediately, threatening queen g6, but now queen g3 covers the g6 square. But instead of that, we play queen c2 first. It's really beautiful. So g3 is still protected by the knight, so it can't play the queen there. And if rook takes rook, knight check. This gets taken, check, and now the queen is just cleaning up, and with a little help from its friends, will deliver checkmate very soon. And mate on h7. So that's the basic idea behind knight e4. Black has various tries, but there's actually no defense in this position. You can see black's pieces on this side of the board. They're just kind of in a box over there. And black's king just doesn't have enough defenders around it. But instead of knight e4, Flores played another tempting move, knight g5. So, you know, he's looking at these ideas, but he didn't quite hit upon the right one. Knight g5 is still very dangerous, but actually black should be winning after this move. Shankland played knight d8, which looks reasonable to defend bishop and pawn, but in fact he should play knight e5. And this actually gives black a winning position, incredibly. attacking the rook, defending f7. So let's see, if rook takes b7, let's have a look at this, take, and now we'll just take on g5, that's okay. Can take on e5, and then knight f7 looks very dangerous, but we take here, and that puts the king in a pin. And now just rook takes, and actually black is winning that position. And there's various other ideas, but that's the main one. So anyway, Shankland missed that and played knight d8. And now if white plays knight ce4, this is good enough to draw the position. Let's just have a quick look. Takes, we'll give a check. Queen comes to d3, threatening queen g6. Remember, there's a pin here. Bishop back, threatening mate on h7, so rook h8. Queen g6, remember there's a pin, there's another pin. And now white can actually force a draw like this. Check. King can't escape, but white is unable to deliver checkmate. But instead of that, Flores played knight ge4. And here Shankland made an error. He played rook c7. He should move the king into the corner. And white has a very strong attack, but actually nothing clear in this position. So rook c7 played instead, and now white wins with this same idea. Knight f6 check. And now queen g4. Queen here. And if rook takes, bishop b1 with mate on h7. Or king h8. Same story. Queen d3 threatening mate on h7. And, well, we can see what happens if pawn takes knight, then bishop b1. And if g6, we can take here. It's just crashing through, and queen g6 and mate. But instead of knight f6, queen g4 was played. Also looks very tempting, but this doesn't work. I'm sure there was time pressure involved in this game. Rook takes rook. Let's clear some wood from the board. Check. Now queen f5. Probably Flores got this far in his earlier calculations and just saw this and mate on h7 again. But here, g6 is good enough. The queen came back. And now Shankland didn't miss his chance. He played bishop takes pawn. Whoops! That's a big crash. He played bishop takes pawn. Excuse me, hit the wrong key. And rook check. The king came up. Check. And if king takes, then you take here, and well, white's attack just peters out. And in the game, the knight retreat, well, the knight stepped in the way, but queen d4 check is a winning move here. White resigned if, well, let's say king here, we give a check, and then bishop c8 with a skewer, and probably mate soon as well. Incredible game, extraordinary tactics, and I think some fantastic attacking ideas there. I just love this idea, coming back to this position, of knight e4. With this idea, knight f6 check, and you know the queen somehow comes to this diagonal. Absolutely beautiful, and amazing that it's such a slow motion threat, and yet black's pieces are so poorly placed he can't actually defend. Great stuff. Well, you can check out the other game that I've recorded from this tournament, played by Sam Shankland, his final round game. You can see the link in the video description, and do check out his playlist as well. There's some entertaining interviews and games from the US Championship as well. Thanks for watching.